Okay, what about now? Hey, hello, Ram. Okay, perfect. So first, let's begin from the beginning. I'm Hisham Mahmoud, and I will be your host for today live session from InfoSec 40C. And really, I'm happy because I'm gonna introduce a new, not a new actually, but it's very, very important exploitation, eternal blue. And really, I want to welcome all the people attending our today live workshop or live session. And here is our today agenda. So first, I will start with a little bit disclaimer here, something that we need to know and understand before starting our today program. Okay. Once we finish the first part here, the disclaimer part, I'm gonna introduce a five domain of war. Once we complete a five domain of war, I'm gonna share the story behind Eternal Blue cyber attacks. And don't worry, at the end, I'm gonna show you a demo here how the attackers can actually use or exploit Eternal Blue vulnerability in order to gain remote access to any Windows machine. Okay. So before we start, I want to share this disclaimer here. This live workshop or this live session, it's for educational purposes only. So I don't recommend to use the techniques that you will get today and launch attack against other people without getting a consent. And in order to get a consent, you must be a certified penetration tester with a permission in order to launch or leverage attack in order to find a weak point in a customer environment and share this weak point with other or the company itself. Okay, so please stay safe. Don't try to exploit any of these vulnerability until you have a written permission. Okay, so I want to start first with a five domain of war. So this is a very interesting concept here. As we know, the first war the mankind ever known was the land. Okay, so we have two army fighting each other, and the one who can control the land, the one who has the equipment, the strategy, and so on, can easily win the war actually. And after this first wave of wars, we invented a new type of war. And nowadays we try to invade or compete with other nation through water using our warship and so on. And the China came with a new shiny idea. They're using a balloon in order to invade other country and won the war. But the United States came with aircraft like Sukhoi, for example, and F-32, and the Russia and United States race here who can control the space in order to launch, a laser beam from the space in order to control or win the war using this kind of, imaginary weapon here. But nowadays we have a new concept of war, and this concept of war called cyber warfare. And imagine that the army, the people nowadays, they have an equipment, and this equipment full of technology, for example, their helmets, their weapons, for example, their mortar, and so on, came with an advanced technology in order to help them to fight and win the war very easy. Also, the aircraft, like Sukhoi, for example, Sukhoi 35, and so on, and also aircraft or the fighter F-32 from the United States. It came with a very advanced technology. Also the chip, also the space, and so on. So imagine that if someone control the fifth domain here, the cyber warfare domain, he can easily control everything. Okay. And that's what we are going to cover today, is eternal flu vulnerability. So what is the story behind eternal flu? So nowadays, actually, the countries or the nation, they using a new concept of war. So instead of implement a spy inside the target country, for example, they using a technology in order to hack or gain an access, for example, and get a highly classified information from their targets. Okay, and United States, they are using something called TAO, or Tailored Access Operation, and it's highly secretive hacking and intelligence gathering unit with the National Security Agency of United States, and its primary mission is to conduct advanced cyber operation to gain access to and exploit foreign computer system and network for intelligent collection purposes. So instead of implementing a spy, for example, to collect this sensitive information. Nowadays, we have an APT and we have a cyber army that can use an advanced technique to gain access into other countries' network, for example, and steal sensitive and highly sensitive information. And the NSA, they found a vulnerability in one of most important protocol in Windows, SMP, which is used for file sharing, printer sharing, and so on. And this vulnerability they used for 5 years before shadow brokers, and it's also a hacking group sponsored by the Russian government, especially the KGB, and they hacked into the National Security Agency, okay, network, and they was able to steal sensitive information. And one of these sensitive information was the exploitation code of the Eternal Blue. And the exploitation code here, the code that gonna use this vulnerability to gain remote access very easily. So imagine that the United States of America, especially the National Security Agency, if they want to beat any of their targets, they're gonna use this kind of vulnerability here in SMP protocol, and they can easily hack into this target remotely and steal sensitive information from. But shadow brokers in April, I believe April 2017, they was able to hack into the NSA network and steal this exploitation. But the problem here, they leaked all this data publicly. So now everyone know there is an exploitation code for a famous protocol SMP. And they started to came with a new attacks and new techniques, the hackers or the threat actors, to gain money, for example, because as you know, every attacker have his own, for example, motivation. Maybe their motivation gonna be make more money, or maybe they can compete with another uh, companies, for example, they can damage another company's reputation and so on. And the world globally hit by a wave of ransomware. And ransomware, basically, it's a malicious software designed to, you know, encrypt all your file and ask you to pay a ransom. For example, hey, if you want to access your folders, your images, your, sensitive document, and so on, you need to pay a money here in order to retrieve your data. And that was a totally disaster here. So WannaCry, I believe it infected more than 250,000 machine globally. Okay, and after WannaCry came NotPetya, another wave of a ransomware, and so on. And actually, this ransomware, it's like a worm here, and worm is gonna use a vulnerability inside your system in order to enter. And once this worm here enter your computer or enter your system, start to search for all the sensitive information. It's gonna look for document extension, Excel extension, image extension, and so on, and start encrypt these files and ask for a ransom here. Okay, and imagine that this vulnerability was used 5 years before Microsoft know Eternal Blue exists. So imagine that anyone can use this technique in order to hack, you know, anyone he wants, for example. And all these techniques, or the cyber warfare shifted, okay, into, or for the nations, for example, in order to use this kind of advanced technology to steal information or spy on other countries and so on. So we don't want to implement a spy and later he can get caught and so on, but we can actually using we can actually use the technology here in order to hack our targets and steal sensitive information, as you see here. So I'm going to show you a demo. Just give me 1 second. I will move to my second screen here. And I believe all of you now can actually see my screen. So we have a Windows machine here, and this Windows box already vulnerable with eternal blue vulnerability. Okay, so I'm going to show you how the hackers can easily hack into this machine and take control of this machine here. And later in our series here, Inj Ahmed Sabit will introduce you another way to, defend or detect this kind of, attacks, and also how to analyze ransomware and recover your file if that possible. So I'm going to open my terminal here, but first I'm going to make the screen in full screen mode. And I have a target IP address here. So because that's an easy scenario, we have that target IP address, but in real world scenario, you need to do your recon, for example, you need to gather all this information before attacking your target. And as I mentioned before, you need to have a consent from the target that you are going to use this technique against his machine and so on. So I'm going to use nmap with st to find the running port here. And I have a lot of ports here, 135, 139, and 445. And that's very, very interesting because this port is related to SMP. So I'm gonna use this port here, but let me first use SV to check what is the version running on each port here. Okay, 33%. Okay, let me show you something faster. So we know port 445 is open. So I'm gonna add -p, and I'm gonna add 139, 445, and 135. And I'm gonna use that JavaScript equal val, which is a script built inside nmap to check if there is a vulnerability in this port here. So nmap, it's a very, very smart tool. Here I'm telling nmap, please, could you check this port if they are vulnerable to the MS17-010, which is eternal blue vulnerability. And let me go up. Yes, a critical remote code execution vulnerability exists in Microsoft SMP version 1. So the vulnerable version will be SMP version 1 here. So now I need to move to my Metasploit. So I'm going to use MSF console, Metasploit framework console, which is a framework the hackers can use to exploit a vulnerability. Okay, and there is a community behind SF console, so they start to develop an exploitation code for a vulnerability. And penetration tester or the people and the responsibility is to find a weak point inside your machine, and they help you to fix it. So they design this exploitation code actually to help you and telling you you are vulnerable to something, that you need to act fast. So I'm going to search using the search module from Metasploit, and I'm going to search for internal. Okay, and Metasploit actually will give me a lot of useful information. So I can use this module here, exploit slash windows slash smp ms17 dash underscore autumn underscore eternal blue. So this is going to be our exploitation code that we're going to use. So I'm going to use the index. So use 0, or you can use the entire module here. Feel free to use any. And I'm going to add a payload here, and the payload will be part of my exploitation. So yeah, you don't need to worry about all this naming here. And I'm going to use shell, and it will be reverse TCP. So actually here, I'm telling Metasploit that you will receive a connection back from the victim machine. And once we receive the connection back from this machine, we're going to have a full control. Okay. So let me check what the option I need here to configure. So my payload, my IP address, my listening port. So this port, I'm going to receive the connection on, and I need to add the remote host. Actually, the remote host will be the IP address of the target machine. So I forget what is the IP address, so I'm going to copy from the result. And I'm going to set the remote host to the victim IP address, and I'm going to type run. And run here, I'm telling the Metasploit framework to start exploit and use these vulnerability remotely. As I mentioned, this vulnerability was used by national security agencies. They use this vulnerability remotely to hack any target, and they can exfiltrate a lot of sensitive data. They can gather a highly intelligent information and so on. So let me hit run and hope everything will perfect without any issue. So that's perfect. So as you see here, now we're controlling this machine remotely. Okay, you can type dir to list all the file in this system32 directory and so on. And you can also change your shell here to have a highly interactive shell. You can also download file, you can take a screenshot, you can using some persistence technique to enter the machine, or gain a full control here on this target. So again, cyber warfare, it's not a traditional topic nowadays, but cyber warfare actually, it's used by nations. In 2008, okay, NATO, they started to mandate a new law. Okay, and they said, if someone, okay, try to hack any computer, okay, and this computer belonged to one of our NATO member, for example, we can declare a war. Okay, so cyber warfare, it's not a fancy topic. It's not a topic that we can neglect nowadays. But as I mentioned, it's very, very important topics. And as you see, this kind of vulnerability could be used to gain access remotely and steal sensitive information from any target machine. Yes, there's still a lot of attacks hidden. There is a lot of 0 days that we don't know about, they are exist or not. But here in InfoSec 40C, we try to give you all the information you need and update your information. So I hope everything was clear. So we can now take your question. So please, if you have any question, if you want to share something, yeah, feel free to add it in the chat. Okay, simply ran this vulnerability in SMP version 1. So the most important task here is to use a different version of SMP. Okay, okay. So Arjun, eternal flow is, an exploitation here. It's a very, very popular vulnerability developed by the National Security Agency, which was leaked by the Shadow Brokers hacker group, and the Shadow Brokers hacker group was sponsored by the KGB from Russia to launch a highly sophisticated attack to steal intelligent information or highly classified information from other countries, for example. And they hacked NSA, the National Security Agency, and they found an exploitation code. This exploitation code allow anyone to gain access to any Windows machine using SMB version 1 remotely, and they can steal any information they want remotely without anyone notice. And they use these vulnerabilities. NSA used this vulnerability for 5 years. Imagine that before Microsoft released a patch in 17 April 2017. So yeah, that's a quick recap. If you have any question, yeah, you're welcome. Yes, exactly. MS17-010. That's the code of this vulnerability, Eternal Blue. And also it has the CVE 2017-0144. Yeah. Okay. I hope everything was clear. And the next live session would be the introducer will be Ahmed Thabit. He will introduce more useful information about Eternal Blue and how the WannaCry actually uses vulnerability. And he's also gonna do a lot of interesting tasks in the upcoming live session. Okay, so thank you so much and stay safe.